They saw a greasy mechanic. She saw a genius. Witness how a shocking act of prejudice unraveled an industry-wide conspiracy. Laughter echoed through the hangar when Ethan Hayes parked his old pickup truck on the private runway at Westlake International Airport. Through the tempered glass windows of the VIP terminal, executives in immaculate suits exchanged looks of disbelief and derision as the 38-year-old black mechanic, his hands scarred from work, unloaded his battered toolbox. "Is this the expert they called for Mrs. Vance's jet?" asked Mr. Victor Thorne, director of operations for Vance Aerospace, not hiding his disdain. "I thought we asked for the best technician in the area, not someone who looks like he just rolled out of a roadside repair shop." Ethan heard the comment but kept his dignity intact. This was nothing new in his life. What no one knew was that those hands had saved more luxury aircraft than all the certified technicians at that airport combined, 15 years repairing executive jets, for national awards for technical excellence. And yet, his face made more of an impact than his resume. "Ms. Vance's jet needs to take off in 2 hours," said the runway supervisor, keeping a calculated distance. "Our technicians haven't been able to identify the problem. If you don't fix it in time, we'll call the Atlanta team." The Gulfstream G650 gleamed in the morning sun like a pristine $65 million jewel. As Ethan approached, he noticed eyes following him through the terminal windows, critical eyes, doubtful eyes, and one pair of eyes that stood out, observant, calculating, intrigued. "Let him work," a female voice ordered, cutting through the silence like a knife. Miss Charlotte Vance, 43, CEO of Vance Aerospace and owner of the jet, strode across the tarmac with purposeful steps. Her navy blue suit contrasted with her immaculately styled brown hair. She didn't look at the executives, only at Ethan. "How much time do you need?" "It depends on the problem, ma'am," Ethan replied, holding her gaze without hesitation. "You have 1 hour," Charlotte replied, checking her wristwatch, which was worth more than Ethan's annual salary. "Impress me." As the executives returned to the comfort of the air conditioning, Ethan opened the main access panel and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The pressurization system had a catastrophic failure that previous technicians had mistaken for a simple electrical problem. If the jet took off in that condition, the cabin would depressurize at 45,000 feet, killing everyone on board. His hands moved with surgical precision as he set to work. No one realized that he wasn't just making repairs, he was saving lives. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Charlotte Vance watching him intently through the glass. Her gaze was different from everyone else's. It wasn't contempt, it was recognition. 30 minutes later, the problem was solved. Ethan closed the panel, wiped his hands on a worn cloth, and began gathering his tools. His work was done. No thanks would be necessary, they rarely were. For people like him, doing the job perfectly was the minimum expectation, never cause for celebration. Then Charlotte Vance emerged from the terminal again, this time alone. She walked directly to Ethan, ignoring the confused looks from her staff. "How long would it have taken them to discover the real problem?" she asked, her voice controlled. "They would never have found it," Ethan replied bluntly. "The jet would have crashed with everyone on board before then." The silence that followed was heavy. Alexandra's eyes examined Ethan with disconcerting intensity. "Come with me," she ordered, surprising everyone, especially Victor Thorne, who watched the scene with growing discomfort. Now, what no one at that airport could have imagined was that this moment was not just about a repaired jet or lives saved. It was the beginning of a story that would challenge prejudices rooted for generations and expose truths that the aviation elite had tried to hide for decades. The biggest of these, the man who had just saved that jet had designed the pressurization system that equipped half of Vance Aerospace's fleet, a system for which Victor Thorne had received all the credit and promotions. If this story about prejudice and recognition touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to find out how a lifetime of discrimination can be transformed into triumph with a simple act of justice. Who would have thought that Charlotte Vance's decision in the next few minutes would not only change Ethan's life but shake the foundations of an entire industry? The executives' eyes followed Ethan and Charlotte as they walked away from the jet, leaving a trail of speculation and nervous whispers in the air. Victor Thorne watched the scene, his face contorted into a mask of worry, his body tense like a violin string about to snap. "My office, now," Charlotte commanded, leading Ethan to an area of the terminal that few employees were allowed to access. Not a word was exchanged during the walk, only the sound of their footsteps echoing through the polished hallways. The private office proved to be a perfect combination of luxury and functionality. Charlotte closed the door, motioned for Ethan to take a chair, and sat down behind her desk. "Did you tell me your full name?" she asked, her eyes studying every detail of him. "Ethan Hayes." A heavy silence filled the room as she typed something into her tablet. Her eyes widened slightly. "Ethan Hayes." "E.H.," she murmured. "The initials engraved on all the original designs for our G7 pressurization system?" Ethan remained impassive, but his fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. "You knew." 3 patents, 4 innovation awards, a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the Technical University. "And yet you repair jets like a common mechanic." "Why?" "Because no one hires a black engineer from the suburbs to lead development teams," he replied without hesitation. "And mechanics have bills to pay, Ms. Vance." Charlotte opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were corporate documents detailing the development of the G7 system, all signed by Victor Thorne as chief engineer. "Do you know how much profit that system has brought my company in the last 5 years?" she asked, leafing through the documents. "Approximately $428 million, Ethan replied, surprised by the accuracy of his answer. "Richard received 3 promotions and a $2.5 million bonus for his work," she continued. "While I continued to fix jets," Ethan finished, showing no emotion. The conversation was interrupted by insistent knocking at the door. Victor Thorne entered without waiting for a response, his face a mixture of false concern and poorly concealed anxiety. "Charlotte, the board is waiting for you on the video conference, and we need to discuss." He stopped when he saw Ethan, his expression hardening. "What is he still doing here?" "The service is complete, right?" "Actually, we were discussing intellectual property," Charlotte replied calmly, "specifically the G7 system." Victor's face paled visibly. "I don't understand what a mechanic would have to contribute to this discussion." "Really interesting," Charlotte showed him a diagram on her tablet. "These are the original drawings, initialed EH. Ethan was just an assistant technician." Victor forced a laugh. "Any minor contribution?" "Minor?" Charlotte interrupted. "I have emails here from you to the HR department recommending Mr. Hayes' dismissal for technical incompetence, exactly 3 days after he submitted the complete G7 project to the internal system." Ethan watched the scene with a calmness that surprised even himself. 5 years ago, when he was escorted out of the building like a criminal, humiliated in front of the entire team, he had sworn that one day the truth would come out. He hadn't expected it to be like this, or so sudden. "Mr. Hayes," Charlotte said, turning to him, "Dr. Olivia Reed has prepared some documents. She would like you to review. Basically, we are proposing retroactive recognition of your authorship, financial compensation for royalties owed, and a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice steady. "The kind that makes history," she replied before turning to Victor. "Victor, you are temporarily relieved of your duties pending the conclusion of the internal investigation. Please hand your badge to security." Victor faltered, his face a mask of contained rage. "You can't do this. The board would never." "The board will be informed in an hour," Charlotte cut him off. "And if you want to retain any dignity, I suggest you walk out that door now before I decide to call security." When Victor left, slamming the door with unnecessary force, Charlotte turned to Ethan and Olivia. "Now we can really get started." What happened in the next 2 hours would change not only Ethan's future but the entire power structure within Vance Aerospace. As Olivia pored over the legal documents, Ethan realized something surprising about Charlotte Vance. She wasn't just trying to right a wrong, there was something else in her eyes, a recognition, an understanding of something much bigger. What no one could have imagined was that Charlotte Vance was keeping a secret of her own. Her briefcase contained not only the documents about the G7 system but also a thorough 2-year investigation into systematic patterns of discrimination and idea theft within her own company. Ethan Hayes wasn't the first, just the brightest, and the one who had left the most indisputable evidence. And Charlotte had waited patiently for the perfect moment to dismantle the entire system from within. Meanwhile, in the airport parking lot, Victor Thorne made a desperate call to his colleagues on the board. His empire was crumbling, but he still had a card up his sleeve, documents and alliances that could not only destroy Ethan's career but also bring down Charlotte Vance herself. What he didn't know was that his every move was being monitored, every call recorded, and that the real battle was just beginning. Charlotte Vance's private meeting room was a world apart from the rest of the airport. Ethan Hayes sat uncomfortably in the leather chair as she closed the door, isolating them from the hum above the terminal. The pressurization system you repaired, Charlotte began, is a modified version of the G7, isn't it? Ethan kept his face impassive. Yes, ma'am. A system that Victor Thorne supposedly designed and for which he received a 7-figure bonus. She slid a folder across the table. A system that, interestingly, has the initials EH on the original blueprints. Silence hung between them for a few seconds. 5 years ago, Charlotte continued, you were a junior engineer at Vance Aerospace. You were fired for technical incompetence 3 days after submitting a complete design to the development department. I have bills to pay, Ethan replied calmly. Mechanics pay bills, too. Charlotte leaned forward. You know what else I found out, Mr. Hayes? You weren't the only one. Over the past 10 years, 7 talented employees have been fired under similar circumstances, all Black or Latino, all shortly after contributing significant innovations. The door opened and a middle-aged woman entered, carrying a tablet. Sorry I'm late, Marcus. This is Dr. Sophia Brooks, our new general counsel. Sophia had been conducting an investigation for the past 8 months. Mr. Hayes, we have substantial evidence of systematic intellectual property theft within Vance Aerospace. Your case is just the tip of the iceberg. In Ethan's mind, flashes of memory, the nights working alone in the lab, the excitement of solving the pressurization problem that no one else could figure out, Hastings' calculating look when he saw the results, the public humiliation of being escorted out of the building. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I need your help, Charlotte replied. Victor Thorne controls half the board. He has powerful friends. I need irrefutable proof to bring him down. And what's in it for me? Recognition. Financial compensation for the royalties owed. And, she hesitated briefly, the position of Director of Innovation that should have been yours 5 years ago. Ethan almost laughed. Do you really think the board would accept a black mechanic as director? Charlotte smiled for the first time. They won't have a choice when they understand what's at stake. Dr. Brooks slid a document across the table. This is a confidentiality agreement. Anything we discuss here. They were interrupted by insistent knocking. Victor Thorne entered without waiting for a response, his face a mask of false concern. Charlotte, the board is waiting. And why is this contract employee still here? We were discussing the G7 system, Charlotte replied calmly. Victor's face paled subtly. I don't understand what a mechanic would have to contribute to advanced engineering. Fascinating, isn't it? Charlotte showed him a diagram on her tablet. These are the original drawings, initialed EH. Ethan was just an assistant technician. Victor forced a laugh. Any minor contribution? Minor? Charlotte interrupted. I have emails from you recommending Mr. Hayes' dismissal for technical incompetence 3 days after he submitted this design. Victor quickly regained his composure. Charlotte, we have an important video conference. The board won't wait while you listen to conspiracy theories. Victor. Charlotte stood up. You are temporarily suspended pending the conclusion of the internal investigation. You can't do that, he exclaimed. The board would never. The board will be informed in an hour, Charlotte cut him off. I suggest you maintain some dignity and leave now. When the door slammed shut, Charlotte turned to Ethan. We have 2 weeks until the general shareholders meeting. We need concrete evidence by then. I have something better, Ethan replied finally. I have the original G7 prototype with my development records, dated and digitally signed. And what's more, I have recordings. Charlotte's eyes widened. Recordings? From 5 years ago. Thorne explaining how to clean my contribution from the company records. How to discredit me. Word for word. Dr. Brooks looked impressed. How did you get that? Ethan smiled for the first time. I grew up repairing electronic equipment in the poorest neighborhood in town. I learned early on that people like me need insurance against people like him. What Charlotte Vance couldn't imagine was that Ethan hadn't just kept evidence about his own case. In his 5 years working as a mechanic, he had meticulously cataloged every stolen patent, every appropriated idea, every talent wasted by institutional prejudice. His simple appearance was his best camouflage. While he repaired Billionaire's jets, he secretly collected the fuel needed to burn down an entire system. Richard Hastings thought he was dealing with nothing more than a humiliated mechanic. He was about to discover that he was facing not only an engineering genius but a patient strategist who had turned 5 years of forced invisibility into the perfect weapon against those who underestimated him. 6 months later, Vance Aerospace headquarters was unrecognizable. The executive floor, once occupied exclusively by white men, now reflected the diversity Charlotte Vance had promised to implement. At the center of this new chapter was Ethan Hayes, no longer an anonymous mechanic but director of technological innovation, leading the division that had created the G7 system. The extraordinary shareholders meeting that had taken place months earlier had gone down in American corporate history. Charlotte Vance, with Dr. Sophia Brooks at her side, had presented irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination and intellectual appropriation, culminating in the devastating recording of Victor Thorne. We need to get rid of this pretentious mechanic, Thorne's voice echoed through the loudspeakers of the crowded auditorium. Take ownership of the system. Eliminate any trace of her authorship. Who would believe that a black woman from the suburbs created something so sophisticated? Our customers trust us, not people like her. The silence that followed was broken by a growing murmur of indignation. The company's stock plummeted 18% that day. But what came next surprised even the most skeptical. I could have sued individually, Ethan explained in his first interview with a prestigious magazine, Aviation Technology, but the problem was bigger than Victor Thorne. It was systemic. The solution proposed by Ethan and fully supported by Charlotte was revolutionary: create a program to identify and reward all employees whose intellectual property had been appropriated over the past 10 years. More than that, establish an innovation fund specifically targeted at historically marginalized communities. Victor Thorne, meanwhile, faced multiple lawsuits. His professional credentials were revoked, and his reputation destroyed. The man who had once ridiculed Ethan on the tarmac now couldn't even find a job as a consultant at third-rate companies. Revenge wasn't my goal, Ethan confided to Charlotte during the inauguration of the Vance Aerospace-funded Community Technology Development Center. Justice was. Visibility was. The center, located in the very neighborhood where Ethan had grown up, offered advanced technical training to young people without access to quality formal education. Under his guidance, 3 revolutionary patents had already emerged from students in the program. You know what's ironic? Charlotte asked, watching a group of teenagers working on a prototype. If Thorne had simply shared the credit with you, he'd still be director. Greed makes people completely underestimate the potential of others. Even more surprising was the proposal Charlotte made to Ethan 3 months after he was hired. It wasn't just a management position she was offering him, but a partnership, literally and figuratively. I thought she was crazy when she suggested a merger, Ethan confessed on Good Morning America. Not a marriage, as people speculated, but a business merger. His small engineering company, which he had kept running out of his garage during those 5 years as a mechanic, was now worth 30% of Vance Aerospace. The former executives who had laughed at him that morning on the runway were no longer laughing. Some had resigned, Unable to serve under her leadership, others remained, learning the hard way that talent and competence have no color. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, Charlotte organized a special event. All employees were invited to the launch of a new propulsion system developed by Ethan's team, a technology that would reduce fuel consumption in commercial aircraft by 40%. A year ago, many of you witnessed a black man being ridiculed while saving lives. Charlotte began her speech. Today, that same man is saving our industry, our planet, and more importantly, he is saving dreams that could have been stifled by prejudice. Ethan scanned the audience, identifying faces that had once treated him with disdain and now applauded him standing. He didn't feel proud of that particular transformation. He knew some were applauding out of self-interest, not genuine conversion. But the young engineers from diverse backgrounds who now occupied positions once unattainable for them, the effort had been worth every second. In the front row sat an unexpected figure, his mother, Mrs. Hayes, 72, who had worked as a cleaning lady in corporate buildings her entire life so that he could go to college. Her eyes were brimming with tears. Real change, Ethan concluded in his speech, doesn't happen when people like me break through the barrier and achieve success. It happens when we open the doors and ensure that talent isn't wasted because of absurd prejudices. True justice isn't just individual, it's structural. The story of the mechanic who became co-owner inspired an entire generation of young engineers from marginalized communities. Similar programs began to emerge at other corporations, partly due to social pressure, partly because they saw the unquestionable success of Vance Aerospace after embracing diversity not as a slogan but as a concrete practice. Success did not erase the scars of a lifetime of prejudice, but it gave Marcus a powerful platform to transform outrage into positive impact. And as he watched the young students at his community center, he knew that the greatest victory was not his job or his fortune, but the look in those young people's eyes, unburdened by the doubt he had carried for decades. The best response to prejudice has never been individual success, but creating a path for others to follow, free from the obstacles that nearly destroyed his dreams. If this story of discrimination turned into collective triumph has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel right now to follow other stories of justice that prove a fundamental truth. Sometimes the greatest act of dignity is not just overcoming barriers, but tearing down the walls so that no one else has to climb so high just to have a fair chance.